Okay, we are live.
Hello. Hi, Ingrid.
Hello. So, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, good day, wherever you're at, whenever you listen to this. My name is Ingrid Lorna. I'm here in the studio again with Julian from Mexico, and tonight we're going to talk about initiations by our earth elemental spirits out of fragmentation, out of slavery, out of domination, out of addiction, out of the whole entire white male patriarchal system into undivided wholeness and flowing movement.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, I want to say that sorry for the outside noise. That I was just thinking, just to bring it down to very simple words and kind of help out somebody that hasn't been following our videos or hasn't seen another video. What you said, we're looking for wholeness, but I came up with a thought that we want to be free and we focus too much on the outside. And yes, we have to consider that, we are enslaved from the outside, where the system, the economic system, the governments restrain our rights, our freedom, etc.
But we choose it. We've been programmed to choose it. So
yeah,
it's not
you ate my words right there. I was going to say that.
Sorry.
You didn't let me finish. But then, because I see this happening a lot, where people will be able to identify the outside, but they don't make the link of their minds and how they reproduce the same logic, the same programming, the same
their choices there. Yeah.
And as long as you don't do the inside work, you are not going to get free on the outside. And and then there's this other very interesting phenomena of people hearing, or maybe I don't know if they know about it, internal mind work. But then there's this kind of this new age Buddhist-like confusion of becoming free inside and the outside doesn't matter, right? This idea that what matters is you being, you changing your mind. But then this came up to me. The mind is not just what you think, what you do, the way you live, the way you interact with the society or with other people or with the world. All of that is the mind. So if you're not changing that as well, you can't just like put your mind in a blank space and then you're free, right? You can't just. You also have to include the outside. You also have to, and that's the wholeness, and that's what you're going to talk to us about. So, bring it on.
My philosophy, my theory on that, Julian, is that people, they think they've done the work and they get into this bubble of, like you said, Buddhism and the freeness, but the problem is they're holding it out here. It hasn't even probably entered their light body. It probably hasn't even entered their luminous field.
Yeah.
It's not even skin deep.
Right. Yeah.
And then if they have brought it in close enough to through their luminous energy field into feeling somewhat visceral, to be somewhat, then they adulterate it with money, with having to monetize it. And then it's just poof, it's gone.
Yeah.
So, or they adulterate it with domination or fragmentation, and that's mostly. So we're going to talk tonight. We're going to start with fragmentation, because it's so widespread through our society and in each one of us, and it leads to a confusion.
Right, right. Yeah.
general confusion of our minds, which creates an endless series of problems and interferes with our clarity of perception so seriously that we're prevented from solving most of the problems.
Yeah. Yeah, fragmentation,
So,
that's a key word,
yeah,
because we can perceive some things, but then we can't link it to another thing, that it's kind of like another fragment of the mind, or of the information, or of knowledge.
because we have to go take a degree in just that, right?
So we have to really,
We have
and
we have to specialize in just that. We can't mix it.
yeah, and when you do that, I remember a lot when they say that the definition of a genius is somebody that can relate to things that are apparently unrelated, right? And he can make sense of two things that are apparently not related. He sees the link between two apparently unrelated things. But here's the thing: the system has grown the apparency of everything into a very unlinked type of reality. So it's not that we're geniuses or we are crazy. I mean, we're just coming back to being normal, but we're so fragmented. Society is so fragmented that the mindset of the world is so fragmented that either, I mean, to be thinking like us, either you're a genius or you're crazy.
Yeah.
Because you're tying things that are not, are the information system says it's not, doesn't go together, doesn't mix. But keep going.
Yeah.
Just a comment.
So art, science, technology, and human work in general are divided into specialties. Each is considered to be separate in essence from the others. So long ago, we became dissatisfied with this state of affairs. And so we set up interdisciplinary subjects, which were intended to unite the specialties. Yet these interdisciplinary subjects have ultimately served to fragment more. They haven't done any integration. They've only fragmented everything more.
Yeah, they created another fragment called interdisciplinary.
Yeah. So our society as a whole has been developed in such a way for millennia that it is broken up into separate nations with different religions, political, economic, racial, gender, and other groups, right? Our humans' environment has correspondingly been seen as an aggregate of separately existing parts to be exploited by all these different groups of people. And so, similarly, each human being has then been fragmented into a large number of separate and conflicting compartments according to our different desires, aims, ambitions, loyalties, psychological characteristics, and more. And you can go online and take many tests to ping yourself into even more fragmentation, right? Like having to go online to see to take a test to see which your constituent element is, or if you're an extrovert or introvert. Every time we take one of these tests, we're fragmenting ourselves further.
Yeah. And now the companies are doing these tests to hire people.
Yeah, they're making it mandatory. So the notion that all these fragments are separately existent is an illusion. And this illusion cannot do anything else other than lead to endless conflict and confusion. So the attempt to live according to the notion that these fragments are really separate, in essence, is what has led to the growing series of crises that we see today. Individually, there's developed an apathy because of this, the widespread feeling of helplessness and despair, because this seems to be overwhelming. An overwhelming mass of disparate social forces going beyond the control and even the comprehension of us humans who are caught up in it. Now, to some extent, it's always been necessary and proper for us in our thinking to divide things up and to separate them so we can reduce our problems and eat the elephant one bite at a time, right? We have to do a certain amount of it. bring it down into manageable portions.
Mhm.
So in certain ways, the creation of special subjects of study and division of labor was an important step forward.
Yeah.
And going back even further, earlier in our history of evolution, our ancestors' first realization that they weren't identical with nature, that we as a human species are not identical with nature, was a crucial step to make it possible to have a kind of autonomy of thinking in our thinking become possible.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, this sort of ability to separate ourselves from our environment and to divide and apportion things has ultimately led to a wide range of negative and destructive results because we lost awareness of what we were doing. And so we extended the process of division beyond the limits in which it works properly. In the process of division is a way of thinking about things that is convenient and useful, mainly in the domain of practical, technical, and functional activities. And when this mode of thought is applied more broadly to our notion of ourselves and the whole world in which we live, then we stop regarding the resulting division as simply useful or convenient and begin to see and experience ourselves as, and our world as actually constituted of many different, completely separated fragments.
Mhm.
So then, being guided by a fragmentary self-world view, we act in such ways to break ourselves and the world up. So it corresponds to our fragmented view of thinking. And then we get proof of the correctness of our fragmentary self-world view. And we overlook the fact that it is us acting according to our mode of thought that has brought about the fragmentation, and now fragmentation has become an autonomous existence independent of our will and desire. It's almost become an archetype.
Mhm. Right.
We've been aware of this state from time immemorial, and we project myths of an earlier golden age before the split between man and nature took place. So realistically, we've always been seeking wholeness, mental, physical, social, and individual wholeness.
Mhm.
So at this point, we need to consider the word health in English is based on an Anglo-Saxon word, hale, meaning whole, that is to be healthy and whole. And also the English word holy is based on the same root as whole.
Wow.
This indicates that we have sensed always that wholeness is an absolute necessity to make life worth living. Yet over the ages, we have lived in fragmentation and continue to not just live in fragmentation, to actively support it and perpetuate it every day.
Mhm.
So now we're going to focus a little bit on the subtle and crucial role of our general forms of thinking in sustaining fragmentation that defeat our deepest urges towards wholeness. Fragmentation is continually being brought about by our almost universal habit of taking the content of our thought as a description of the world as it is. So
Right.
we start with taking the content of our thought and saying, this is the reality. This is the way the world really is.
Mhm.
Since our thought is pervaded with differences and distinction, it then follows that such a habit leads us to look on these distinctions as real divisions. And so we see and experience the world as actually broken up into fragments, and then it responds by showing us a fragmented world that cements this belief in us. In scientific research, a great deal of our thinking is in terms of theories. The word theory derives from the Greek word theoria, which has the same root as theater, which means theater means to make a view of or a spectacle.
Right.
So we can say that theory is primarily a form of insight, a way of making a spectacle of
It's a single
looking at the world.
perspective theory.
Yes. And it's not actually a form of knowledge of how the world is, but we've let ourselves slide into the thing that theory is exactly what the world is. It's not just a form of insight.
And that way, anybody else's theory can become our world, and that's that's a perfect enclosure, the perfect slavery
Yeah.
system.
So for example, in ancient times, man had the theory that celestial matter was fundamentally different than earthly matter, and that it was natural for earthly objects to fall, while it was natural for celestial objects such as the sun, moon, and stars to remain up in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
Then the theory came that there was no difference between earthly matter and celestial matter, and so that implied that heavenly objects like the moon ought to fall. But for a long time, man didn't notice the implication of this new theory, that celestial matter and earthly matter are one and the same, till a sudden flash of insight or theory. Newton was that as the apple falls, so does the moon, and so do all objects. And so he was led to the theory of universal gravitation.
Yeah.
In this theory, all objects were seen as falling toward various centers, and so a new way of looking at the heavens came about, and we could discover new planets because of the rate of fall of other planets. I can't get into it any more than that because that's way above my, way outside my purview right now. The rate of fall of planets helps us discover others. I don't understand that. So this Newtonian form of insight worked really well for several centuries, and ultimately it has then led to unclear results when extended into new domains. But that's what we do. We take it as the world as it is, the gravitational, everything is, that's the world as it is. So we extend it outside its useful domain and it fragments.
Mm-hmm. The way I understand Newtonian physics is that it kind of explains the nature of physics as seen here on Earth, but as soon as you start going outside in space and consider time,
well,
it doesn't link very well with Einstein's relativity.
That's the domains, and we're going to get further into this. So you know, the Newtonian theory worked very well, but then we had new domains emerge, and new domains of insight, like the theory of relativity and quantum theory, were developed. These new theories gave a radically different picture of the world from that of Newton, but that doesn't make his theory invalid. It's just valid in a limited domain now. It can extend into
another domain,
relativity and quantum theory, because it fragments it.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So if we suppose that theories give true knowledge corresponding to reality as it is, then we would have to conclude that the Newtonian theory was true until around 1900, after which it would suddenly become false, while relativity theory and quantum theory would suddenly then become truth.
Mm-hmm.
Such absurd conclusions will not arise if we say that all theories are insights, which are neither true nor false, and clear only in certain domains, and unclear when they're extended out of their domain.
Mm-hmm.
So then we can find that older theories become more and more unclear when we try to use them to obtain insight into new domains.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of supposing that older theories become falsified at a certain point in time, we can say that man is continually developing new forms of insight, which are clear only up to a point, and then tend to become unclear. But we hang on to them even when they're unclear, and this causes fragmentation. In the activity of saying man is continually developing new forms of insight, there is evidently no reason to suppose that there is or will be a final form of insight corresponding to absolute truth. Rather, we can expect an unending development of new forms of insight that assimilate key features of older forms.
Yeah, we want to be monotheorists.
Yeah. So when we look at the world through our theoretical insights, the factual knowledge that we obtain will be shaped and formed by our theories. For example, again, in ancient times, the fact that about the motions of the planets was described in terms of epicycles, circles superimposed on other circles. In Newton's time, this fact was described in terms of precisely determined planetary orbits, analyzed through rates of fall toward various centers. Later came the fact, as seen relativistically through Einstein's concept of space and time. And then still later, a different sort of fact was specified in terms of the quantum theory, which gives only statistical facts.
Mm-hmm.
In biology, the fact is now described in terms of the theory of evolution, while in earlier times it was expressed in terms of fixed species of living beings. So it just evolves, and facts and insights evolve and grow, and that's what they're supposed to do, but we become fixated and try to pull this fully into that, and that's when we become fragmented. Given perception and action, our theoretical insights provide the main source of organization of our factual knowledge. Our overall experience then is shaped by our factual knowledge. A man by the name of Immanuel Kant pointed out that all experience is organized according to the categories of our thought, on our ways of thinking about space, time, matter, substance, causality, contingency, necessity, universality, particularity, and more. So we can say that these categories are general forms of, or insights, general forms of insights or ways of looking at everything. And in a certain sense, then they become theories of our own from our experience.
Mm-hmm.
Clarity of perception and thought evidently requires that we be generally aware of how our experience is shaped by the insight provided by the theories in our general ways of thinking. So experience and knowledge are one process, rather than to think that our knowledge is about some sort of separate experience. Now, if we're not aware that our theories are ever changing forms of insight, giving shape and form to our experiences in general, our vision will be very limited and very unclear.
Yeah.
So experience with nature is very much like experience with human beings. If one approaches another, say if I approach you with a fixed theory about you being an enemy against whom I must defend myself, you will absolutely respond as my enemy. And then my theory would be confirmed by this experience. So nature is the same way. If we approach her with a theory that she's an enemy, she'll show us an enemy.
Right.
That's
pretty profound. I mean, yeah, never heard it in those words. Very helpful.
That's how we fragment things.
We project. We project ourselves into the world, and we want to believe the scientific or the scientist world or narrative wants to say the universe is what it is, and our perception of it does not affect it, and it's the opposite.
And that's fragmentation completely. So what prevents theoretical insights from going beyond existing limitations and changing to meet new facts is just the belief that theories give true knowledge of reality, which implies that the theories, need never change. Do I need to say that again? It's a complex sentence full of
Say that again.
What prevents theoretical insights from going beyond existing limitations and changing to meet new facts is just the belief that theories give true knowledge of reality. This implies that the theories, don't ever need to change.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
although our modern,
I mean, we it's almost like we have a need for a fixed rule or law or something.
That's fragmentation. Yeah. So although our modern way of thinking has, of course, changed a great deal relative to the ancient one, the two have had one feature in common. They are both generally blinkered by the fact, by the notion, not the fact, by the notion that theories give true reality, true knowledge about reality as it is. So we're blinkered, like when you put the blinders on the horses so they can't see out the sides of their eyes. We're blinded, blinkered by the notion that theories give true knowledge about reality as it is, when theories are just insights. So both the ancient way and modern way of thinking are led to confuse the forms and shapes induced by our perceptions by theoretical insight with a reality independent of our thought and our way of looking.
Right.
This confusion is of crucial significance since it leads us to approach nature, society, and each other in terms of more or less fixed and limited forms of thought. And so we keep on confirming the limitations of these forms of thought and experience.
Wow, yeah.
This sort of unending confirmation of limitations in our modes of thinking is particularly significant with regard to fragmentation, for every form of theoretical insight introduces its own essential differences and distinctions. If we regard these differences and distinction as ways of looking, as guides to our perception, this does not imply that they denote separately existent substances or entities. On the other hand, if we regard our theories with their differences and distinctions as direct descriptions of reality as it is, and this is what we do, we see our theories with their differences and distinctions as the absolute fact of reality as it is, and that's fragmentation. So we'll then be led by the illusion that the world is consisted of fragments and cause us to act in such ways that we produce the fragmentation.
Right.
Some people might say, well, fragmentation of cities, religions, political systems, conflict in the form of wars, general violence, etc., are the reality. Wholeness is only an ideal which we can never reach. And the true reality, the nature of reality is as it is that wholeness is what is real. Absolutely what is real. And that fragmentation is the response of this whole to man's action guided by illusory perception, which is shaped by fragmentary thought.
Yeah.
In other words, it is just because reality is whole that man with our fragmentary approach will inevitably be answered with a corresponding fragmentary response. So what's needed for us, for men, is to give attention to our habits of fragmentary thought, to be aware of them and to bring it to an end. Our approach to reality may then be whole, so the response will be whole.
Wow.
For this to happen, it's crucial that we be aware of the activity of our thought as a form of insight, a way of looking, rather than a true copy of reality as it is. What is called for is not an integration thought, an integration of thought of like imposed unity, because such an imposed point of view would itself be merely looking, creating another fragment. Rather, all our different ways of thinking are to be considered as different ways of looking at one reality, wholeness, each with some domain in which it is clear and adequate, and then you move out of that domain and it's no longer accurate or adequate. So each view gives only an appearance of the object in some aspect. The whole object is not perceived in any one view, rather it is grasped implicitly as that single reality which is shown in all the views. So let's consider, for example, the atomic theory, which was first proposed by Democritus more than 2,000 years ago.
Okay.
This theory leads us to look at the world as constituted of atoms that are moving in the void. The ever-changing forms and characteristics of large-scale objects are now seen as the results of changing arrangements of moving atoms. Evidently, this view was in certain ways an important mode of realization of wholeness, for it enabled man to understand the enormous variety of the whole world in terms of the movements of one single set of basic constituents.
Yeah.
Through a single void that permeates the whole of existence. Well, as the atomic theory developed, it ultimately became a major support for a fragmentary approach to reality, because it ceased to be regarded as an insight, a way of looking. Men regard it instead as an absolute truth, that the whole of reality is constituted of nothing but atomic building blocks, all working together mechanically.
Mm-hmm. Wow, yeah.
So to take any physical...
It helps out
What did
to
you say?
understand that atomic theory helps with chemistry, but that's its domain, right? That's the limit of its domain.
Yeah, right. To take any physical theory as an absolute truth must tend to fix the general forms of thought in physics and so contribute to fragmentation. Beyond this, the particular content of atomic theory was such as to be especially conducive to fragmentation, for it was implicit in the content that the entire world of nature, along with the human being, his brain, nervous system, mind, heart, and all could in principle be understood completely in terms of structures and functions of aggregates of separately existent atoms.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that in man's experiment and general experience, this atomic view was confirmed was of course taken as proof of the correctness and universality of universal truth of this notion. So almost the whole weight of science has been put behind the fragmentary approach to reality through the atomic theory. What's important to point out is that the experimental confirmation of the atomic point of view is limited. And in the domains covered by quantum theory and relativity, the notion of atomism leads to confused questions, which indicates the need for new forms of insight, as different from atomism as the latter is from the theories that came before it.
Mm-hmm.
We could go into a whole lot more here about the atom, but so I'll end with saying that both relative theory and relativity theory and quantum theory both imply the need to look at our world.
Yeah.
The reality of it being an undivided whole in which all parts of the universe, including us, the observer, and his instruments merge and unite in one totality. In this totality, atomic form of insight is a simplification and abstraction valid only in some limited context.
Yeah.
So this new form of insight can best be called undivided wholeness in flowing movement.
Okay. Got me thinking. Came up with the idea. The whole can only be explained by the whole, right? Where we are always trying to, like Einstein was always looking for this one theory that would unite all the theories. But then all these theories need to come down to linear math, right? They have to be translated or like reduced into another language, or to a simplification, must be simplified, must be explained. And maybe it's not possible. I mean, maybe you can't explain the whole through a fragment, right?
You can't see the whole beauty of a diamond just by looking at one of its facets. You have to see the whole thing.
Right.
And we can't see undivided wholeness and flowing movement if we're pulling out a piece of it and saying, this is the reality. This is a rock. This is reality. It's all of reality is a rock. How can you say it's undivided wholeness and flowing movement? Well, that's because you just abstracted the rock out of the river of life. And you're hanging on to it as saying, this is absolute reality when the whole river's running by without you.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, also gets me thinking that, you know, you'll get a lot of arguments that these theories and this science help a lot in bringing some type of primitive, and there's this created idea of what the ancient man is, ancient civilization is, which is very Netflix-like. It's very Hollywood, you know, this very limited idea of, oh, we used to be very religious, and we used to believe a lot of BS. Man used to have a lot of myths, and thanks to this science, we now understand the reality. But the fact is that when you start studying other cultures, especially if you take your focus out of Europe and you start looking around other parts of the world, you'll see that those cultures they came pretty close to the understanding of the whole.
Yeah.
So it's part of this narrative of this colonial mindset, wanting to make the, trying to make us think that the ancient, and even that's probably limited, that ancient Europe was like the only ancient, or only past, right? There's a lot of different pasts, a lot of different civilizations. It probably was civilizations we didn't even know about, and obviously,
absolutely,
they've been vetted from our knowledge, or any type of evidence about them is going to be censored.
So, and so it is this insight, this new form of insight of undivided wholeness and flowing movement that each elemental spirit is pushing us into becoming with initiations. They'll push us, they'll pull us, they'll drag us in screaming. And if we don't take part in the initiation, we come out on the other end and have to go through another one that's even worse than that one. So initiations by our ye spirits, our earth spirits in our physical body would include issues with our stomachs, our pancreas, and our spleen. So if you're not paying attention, if there's something in your life you need to confront, if that is really fragmented and your ye spirit is pushing you into an initiation, there might be a possibility you get diagnosed with diabetes during this pivotal point, because the earth spirits are dominating right now. We're in the turning point between seasons. Yes, we still, here in Oklahoma, we still have summer, but fall is very evident. So earth elemental spirits are mixing summer and fall together right now. Mm-hmm. So this would be our dominant element to go out of balance at this point in time. Maybe the earth spirits will say, along with the metal spirits, will say, you're not listening to me. We're going to tip your car over. Now you're going to have an accident. Now we've got it. Your spleen is going to be gone. Mm-hmm. Right. Or you just end up with a diagnosis of ulcers, or you have a lot of stomach pain. Now, all these are omens to say, to tune in to your earth spirits and say, what's going on? Are you initiating an initiation? What's going on? How can I bring you into balance? How can we sail through this initiation into undivided wholeness and flowing movement more and more and more? And it's not about the end of actually becoming undivided whole and flowing movement. It's about the fact of actually putting our toes in the river and saying we're going to become part of this process. Mm-hmm. there's many other ways. We can face initiations. The part of the earth is, and this would go to wood also, is roots, but like the roots of our beliefs would be challenged in an earth elemental initiation. It's kind of hard to quantify, to qualify, to say to try to come up with every kind of initiation that the earth spirits, and right now it wouldn't just be our earth spirits initiating us, it would be a combination of earth, fire, and metal right now. So we've got a triad of initiations that can happen during this time frame to try to draw us out of our fragmented state, to face our fragmented state, so that we take one step further, put our toes in the water of undivided wholeness and flowing movement.
And if that happens, it's a lucky thing, I guess, because so many people don't get initiated. I don't see them getting initiated. Like you say, they'll take the hook, line, and sinker, the whole thing.
They'll take the diagnosis of diabetes as like, oh my God, I'm now diabetic, and this becomes their whole reality, and they don't realize that diabetes can only be a transitory thing.
Yeah.
If they listen to their elemental spirit and come into alignment and into balance and flow through the initiation, the diabetes can go poof, just like the $6 trillion that went poof from the Chinese banks in the last week.
Oh, really? I didn't know about that one.
Yeah. The Chinese economy is collapsing. They just poofed at $6 million, just disappeared and into thin air. And they say 75 million in America is going to do, or 75 billion. It was 6 billion, not just 6 million, 6 billion. 6 trillion. Sorry, $6 trillion. Poof. And that's the same thing. Let me bring it again. You get a diagnosis of diabetes. That diabetes can go poof just as easily as that $6 trillion went poof.
Right.
If you listen to the initiation, if you let the initiation flow.
Yeah. So that's what the earth spirits would be trying to bring us to. And in that case, nothing bad that happens to us is bad if we're able to listen to the spirit that is behind. But
Right.
if we're not, then if all that we can hear is just the system, the doctor, then we're lost.
Right.
I mean, we're just become another a product, something they're consuming. You'll just become a piece of meat they're eating, a piece of.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's hope that this can help and connect people with whoever's listening to the spirits, and may I say that this this, it's very interesting how we've adopted in our minds the dominator. We all have this like kind of like an archetype of the reptilian dominator mind that's always trying to the first thing we want to do is defend the status quo. We want to defend the current state of knowledge, right? But at the same time we're defending this, we're perfectly perceiving the reality as a whole. We're never really separated. We're always really, conscious.
We are always undivided wholeness and flowing movement. We just fragment ourselves out of it.
Right. So it's like we are perceiving all of this, but at the same time, we want to defend this idea like if it was ours, and it's never ours. We want to defend
And
this you know, this system or this science or this whatever, you know.
Well, that's the psyop of control behind it. The psychological operation is to so embedded in us that we defend it like it's our own theory and don't realize that it never was our own theory. It never was our way of insight, and it's keeping us clutching the rock instead of flowing in the river of undivided. And see, it's very easy. I was just talking today with a friend about how important that two-letter word "in" is. Undivided wholeness, in flowing movement, which means I'm part of it, right?
Yeah.
I am, and so we were saying, so it would be saying I'm in a canoe, I'm in the canoe floating the river. And I said, well, that's the problem. Every time you add the word "that," you're now fragmenting and separating yourself. You are the river, you are the canoe. So that's why I shared with you the song, Tracy Chapman's song last week, New Beginning, where she's like, we need to start all over from the beginning and create a whole new language, because to reference that in a undivided wholeness language, it would be like, I am in canoeing, in rivering, something like that, right?
Well, yeah. That's the wonders I get from native languages, where you won't find that much of that division. Like in Nahuatl language, you can make anything becomes a verb. So you can actually say that I am the river, and like the way you would say I'm in the river would be I'm the river. I'm doing the river. I'm rivering.
I'm rivering would be the undivided wholeness in flowing.
There's that's the way you would say that actually in native language.
I'm rivering. Yeah. But so it's all about the journey, and it was very important. And in David Boehm's book of Wholeness in Implicate Order, he actually goes into verbs and and how we can. It's a complex, very complex. I'm going to have to read it 2 or 3 times before I really comprehend it. But how the way we use the way we speak words totally, the verbs of action totally shifts.
Yeah. And it's always very it's a task. It's a nice task to try to express in language, where I believe that we're able to perceive reality way beyond language, and that reality happens in many different dimensions, not just linguistical
domains, dimensions.
When you want to bring it into, I mean, you still have to, or not have to, but you still, we still want to talk. So once we're talking, we have to be aware that what we see is limited. It's never going to reflect the whole complexity, all of the perspectives. We always kind of, when we say something, we always have to say something. We always have to, somehow it's a way of reducing when you speak. But if you're aware of that, then that's better. If you're not,
yeah,
because like now we can't speak about the whole. We wouldn't have time. You can't, we can't say it all. We can't explain it all. We can't bring it all down into language.
No, because as soon as we try, we're differentiating ourselves from it. And which, like I said at the beginning, is to some extent differentiating and fragmenting serves us, because that's what gives us our world of 10,000 things. But then we live in fragmentation instead of allowing ourselves to return to wholeness. And undivided wholeness and flowing movement consistently.
Yeah. Awesome. So I think we have still to cover in another set, more of the sovereignty pillars, more of the
More of our self-governance pillars. Yeah. We
So
can
it's
talk
been-
about energy, maybe energy and education next week, the 2 E's.
Okay, I like that having two of them begin with the same word, with the same letter. So the 2 E's, that'll be easy to remember as well.
Yeah.
Great. So
The 2 E's of self-governance.
so a sneak peek for folks here. The next week, 6 o'clock, we'll be speaking about how do you become, things that we can share about becoming energy sovereign and education sovereign. I think we've given a whole lot of background on the education part, where we've been speaking about the programming, so we'll speak about that then. What goes on, all that programming that happens at schools,
Yeah.
and how you can just be sovereign of that. You can just realize that that's limited, that nobody is benefiting from that education. Nothing is, there's no good in that. And still,
Yeah.
I mean, then somebody would think, well, we have to learn something. Yeah, of course. Yeah, you have to study, you have to learn. It's just that, who is feeding that learning? Who is feeding that knowledge to you? And what knowledge are they giving you?
Right.
So we have to start eating better, and education wise, just not just like store-bought animal feed. That's the education system. It's but anyways, we'll get into that next week. And this was very, very profound. I really enjoyed this conversation, and leaves me with a lot of things to think, and it inspired me a whole lot to come up with new words, to hear you say so many things that maybe they were in my mind, but I couldn't quite bring words to them. Well, you've helped do that, and I think that's a big work of healing that is happening through these conversations. So you're welcome, people, to join us in the next one, next week, next conversation with Sacred Blue Heron Woman and me, Julian Catari.
And
So I
with
guess
that,
would
we
do
will
it.
end.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll end the live